It's good to have you here. I'm Jane Keener-Quiat, and I'm the pastor here at Aspen Community Church. And I welcome Connie and Andrew. Connie Baxter Marlow and Andrew Cameron Bailey. Beautiful names.
Thank you, you got that right.
We like yours too.
Well, we met at an event over at the Jerome about a year ago, I think, and somebody said, you two have to meet. So we got to talking. We've been talking ever since.
And I had my eye on you, and I thought, oh my goodness, here I am next to Jane. And Jane, would you like a trust frequency book? And then what happened?
Well, I started reading it, and then I said to her, I believe the next time I saw you, I said, there are a lot of themes in there that really go with Christianity. It wasn't your purpose in that book, but I felt the connection. And what excited me about it was that it gave us a new cosmology to think about our lives, to think about the Spirit, that thing we call God, and how God or the divine is connected to us and how we can live our lives. And when I say it gave us a new and practical cosmology, it's not that quantum physics and the work people are doing, and that has been around a while. But there's still a bit of a stumbling block, I think, between many traditional Christians about how it all began. People are much more open now to science than many of the Christians were, let's say, 20, 30, 40 years ago. But there's still, we have those foundational stories. They're beautiful, wonderful stories about God's creation. And most of us consider that it was not in 7 days, but there was a deep meaning to that story, a wonderful story. But when people have wanted to take it literally, then it kind of closes the door to all the other thinking, to understand who we are and how we might function in this world, how the universe and human beings are really connected in every kind of way. So that's what I like about it. I mean, that just made me, stay with it. And the other thing I noticed that I was really, you must be very glad that it was that Bill Gladstone wanted to represent your book along with some of the other books that are about this new consciousness about how to look at the world. So I've said those things. Why don't you tell me some things about, why did you write it? What brought this about?
Well, Andrew and I both, interestingly enough, we came together later in life, 10 years ago, actually, almost, we just celebrated our anniversary. And we discovered early on, almost immediately, that we shared an interest in what was it going to take for humanity to align with its true self, its higher self, its loving nature. And he as a teen and me as a teen had asked those questions. He as a young man and me as a teen had asked this question, what was it going to take? And my question was really, okay, there's something missing in the paradigm. What is missing that has us behaving the way we do? Because I feel that humanity is a loving being and we're capable of so much love. It's astounding how much love we're capable of. And so I asked that question, and the answer you get depends on the question you ask. And I started getting led to discoveries about what is missing in the paradigm. And I found it, after looking in Europe, finding just the same old way of thinking, I discovered the Native American cosmology. So here we have on the cover, we have Kokopelli equals MC squared. Because what came to me was that the Native people are carrying an incredible cosmology, an incredible understanding of the nature of the universe, of how interconnected we are and how loved we are by a conscious, loving universe, which is what we're bringing to the table. And Andrew has his story of how he got to it.
So the question is, how did we come to write the book? Is that what?
So how did your background shape you into an interest in doing this?
All right. So I grew up in South Africa, and at the age of 14, I met my first genius, and he was a guy named Barry Oliver Higgs. He's a noted South African poet. And at 14 and 15, he started bringing these books to school, books of Buddhism and even Jack Kerouac's On the Road. So things that were way outside of the school curriculum. And I think our little group of people started really thinking what it was about in those days. Now, I was raised really non-Christian outside of church.
Me too.
And it was only later I was finally baptized at the age of 17 and experimented with Christianity, Anglicanism in South Africa, Church of England. And it was interesting, but at the same time I was studying quantum physics and trying to put those things together. And then I ended up doing a course in social anthropology, comparative religion, and I discovered the cosmology of the Australian Aborigines. And in a certain sense, that's what triggered it for me. This is in college now, I was probably 18 or 19. They were speaking sort of pure poetic quantum science, and it made absolute sense to me based on my personal intuitive understanding of the nature of the universe. That's where it really started for me. Then I came over to this country in search of cosmic consciousness, something I read about in a Time magazine or a Life magazine. Do you remember that was a big buzz in the 60s, cosmic consciousness?
Matthew Fox and...
Well, that's much later.
Oh.
So this was actually the beginning of when the gurus started coming over here, people started going to India. Everybody was looking for the sort of this perennial philosophy and how that might apply to individual human lives and to society, to the larger groups of people. So I came to California and found myself at Esalen Institute, found myself getting initiated into yoga practices, and started my personal exploration. Fast forward to 2003, I'm at the Omega Institute in upstate New York studying with some Siberian shamans who were extraordinary. These Siberians, I really liked the indigenous, and I spent a lot of time with Sufis. There's something about these, a Sufi is a lover of God, is an ecstatic, someone who is just literally in love. Because there is nothing but love, so there's no place to be but in love, but how many people know that? A Sufi is someone who's just unashamedly, unabashedly in love. So then I meet this girl, and of course we find ourselves unashamedly, unabashedly in love, and then we're driving, and she's reading stuff to me from the past, from pieces that she had written, and we hadn't stopped talking. I mean, we met and we didn't stop talking for, you know how that goes.
And I've been around you a few times, and you...
Right. But in just the two of us, it was just extraordinary to discover a fellow traveler on this path. And I kept saying, Connie, you have to write a book. Connie, you have to write a book. Connie, you have to write a book. I don't think she wanted to write a book.
So he wrote the book.
So we wrote a book. I actually did the physical writing and put Connie's ideas along with everything that I had learned from everything from Vedanta, from ancient, East Indian understanding, to the Aborigines, the Bushmen of the Kalahari. I studied with Native Americans, as had Connie much more than I had, but I'd done sweat lodges, and I'd studied with Sun Bear, who has passed away now, but he was quite a well-known Native American. And the mission with the book was to create something truly practical. Now, one of the problems I had with Christianity, as I discovered it, is that there was a lot of ritual, there was a lot of stuff. It was not high church, Church of England, but nevertheless. And it just seemed to me that it was human stories. It wasn't the perennial philosophy. It wasn't, and it didn't take me there. It didn't take me there. Never. I don't know what it did for others, but it just did not take me to a place that I personally desired to go. So all of this, I think it was 35 or 40 years of inner work, a lot of play, a lot of fun, a lot of family and babies and music and all the things that happen in between, but that's all part of learning to be a human being. My idea was, okay, here's something that's important. Here's something that is practical here's something that will really help the reader to really get somewhere. Because from my observation, so many people have done so much inner work. They've gone to yoga religiously, they've gone to every guru, they've gone to church, they've done all these things, but they're still struggling. They're not there. They get glimpses of it, but they're not there. So really the idea was, okay, what would it take to get there? So that's what this idea of the 10 assumptions for a new paradigm. Our whole current paradigm is based on a certain set of assumptions. So the book is very simply, okay, did I choose these assumptions? No, I inherited them from my culture. And secondly, do I like them? Do I want to base my life on these beliefs that are often fear-based? And one thing I love from Connie, she just came up with this whole idea of, it's her term, the trust frequency, the whole idea of a trust-based paradigm that's based on trust in a conscious, loving universe. Now, the universe we're taught about in school and college is not a conscious, loving universe. It's a mechanical thing, like a gigantic clockwork, right? So
It's sort of a track through history, but not through consciousness.
Yeah.
And for me, although I went to Sunday school, my parents weren't Christian. They never darkened the door of a church. I did go to Sunday school, so I was somewhat familiar with Jesus and his stories, and we, generally growing up in this country, you are generally, familiar with a lot of what Jesus did, and we quote Jesus in this book because he, as my journey of discovery came, so much came to me through what he did, what he embodied, what he represented. His miracles actually, to me, are actually the true nature of the universe in the trust frequency, in the higher frequencies. So we really want to maybe center this discussion around Jesus and how he embodied these universal truths that we're articulating in this book from a different perspective, this indigenous cosmology, quantum science, mystical synthesis into a new way of articulating it for the 21st century, but how does it relate to the essence of Christianity and all those, what can we be bringing to all those Christians out there who resonate to his words, but can't accept where the church has taken it.
Well, two of the things you mentioned, you mentioned the word fear, which I think a lot of people live in fear. I mean, a lot of religious people are religious because they live in fear. But Jesus didn't live in fear. And we were just studying the story of the mustard seed, where he says, if you have just the faith of the mustard seed, you can. And what he meant there was not that you need a whole lot more faith than you have. It means a little faith, but that faith means trust. That's trust to live your life, trust to move ahead. But sometimes we don't act like that. We don't. But one of the things that comes to my mind is that he did. He didn't live in fear, and he. For example, in Matthew, when we were talking about this Sufi, in that loving of God, and Jesus expressed that a lot. But seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added. Or ask and it will be given, and search and you will find, knock and the door will open. These are not fear-based statements.
No.
That's right.
You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind and soul, and your neighbor as yourself, because then that opens you up to more love.
Yeah, and I think the tools we're giving in this book help people to actually apply this knowledge to life. Because you can say it, you can grow up and go through all that, whatever, but if you're in a fear-based paradigm and everybody else is operating out of fear, and you're taught to compete, and you're taught if you're not going to survive, you're not going to support your family, if you don't behave like this, in society. It's a dog-eat-dog world, and you got to go for it. Instead of understanding that all this will be asking you, we shall receive, and all this will be given to you and more, and all this beautiful stuff that Jesus has brought. And what we're doing is really giving a foundation and an understanding to actually put your life on the line and live it.
Well, when we see Jesus coming up through, like your book or your conversation, we see the character, the person of Jesus coming at us, not just in the scriptures and not just in the church itself, because I think the church, say the big church that we might talk about in a very general way, through history has served in a lot of ways as a method of control and power. And it's too bad that these very deep things about how to live our lives got lost. Didn't get lost with everybody, and it was there for some, but church took on, I think a pretty dangerous kind of authority and power in the world. And that turns people away from it. I mean, I've been a part of the church all my life, but sometime back there I went, Jesus doesn't fit in this. The church dropped him in about the 3rd century as the church built its establishment in Rome and around the world. And I think maybe just in the past few years or decades, some of the church is really trying to get to know Jesus again.
All right. That's good news.
Yes, that's very good news.
Well, the whole emphasis of Jesus on the cross, as opposed to Jesus with the white robes and the loving hands and the lamb and the children and all that, why isn't that more of the essence of Jesus than he died for your sins? See, because that is totally guilt-inducing, and control-inducing right there. I'm bad, and Jesus died for my sins, and how am I ever going to...
And that thought, that belief came along some years later. It wasn't there with those early followers. What was with them is that they had established a way to live and to care for one another. And then their leader is crucified, killed, and then they begin to experience him again. He's there, walking through doors. He's there all of a sudden, grilling fish. He's there at different times. And so they begin to try to embody that spirit. It got lost among a lot of the church, but hopefully we're coming back to him. Hopefully Marcus Borg wrote a book that I've just loved. What is it? Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time.
Well, and he also said the kingdom of God is within.
Right.
So I think that's the point, is that we're coming to that place that he embodied within ourselves. When it's something that's coming forth from inside rather than meeting. That's what I think the second coming is the coming of our knowledge, our Christ consciousness in each of us, that we raise to that frequency. And that's what we're bringing in this the trust frequency, is that we raise our frequency to a place where we bring heaven to earth. We become God like Jesus, like ourselves.
Do you think we are, as a culture, maybe say here in the United States, becoming more conscious? Do you
Yeah, absolutely.
sense we are?
I do. But I have to say that we see a certain segment of the larger society. It may be that it's kind of separating out. What we're seeing is extraordinarily encouraging.
Yeah, as people are opening their hearts, because all the systems that have kept us kind of separate and fighting for our money and going for this and in our little houses. We're starting getting, the systems are collapsing, and the Katrina and all the, what happened in Boulder, what the earth is doing to set us loose from all of that accumulation of wealth and accumulation of that this is the way it is. It's not that way anymore. I mean, when we just came from Boulder, there are people who lost their homes, lost their cars, lost everything. They're in hotels. We were just in a hotel with people that lost everything. We're getting, and with the monetary system collapsing, we're getting thrown onto our own inner knowing, our own trust. We have to. There's nothing, we can't trust those artificial things that we put our trust in before, and that we're security. I've got a home, so I'm secure. Well, guess what?
It can be
That can change
demolished with
tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
I've got money in the bank, I'm secure. That I've already changed. I mean, with this whole banking fiasco that's been going on.
Mm-hmm.
So, I feel, from my perspective, what I see is that's what everything is about, is taking us to a place where we choose our own hearts. We choose our own spirits. We choose a higher level of consciousness.
So that kind of goes to what the title of your book is, the trust frequency. How do we get there? How do we?
All right. I think Jesus is a very good example of that. If we can really penetrate to who that being was, what that love-based idea that he brought, I don't think he ever said anything about you have to fear God. You said he didn't fear God. He came out with a love. His message is essentially a message of love. And I think he provides a superb example of exactly what he's someone who walked the trust frequency 2,000 years ago. And many have done it since, and many are doing it right now. It's not easy because the mainstream appears to be, its view of the world is much more based on fear and doubt. And, the church has so often, I'm proud, I'm a God-fearing man. A God-fearing man. There's something,
It's a little scary, isn't it?
There's something wrong with that statement, right? And I had a conversation recently with a young Muslim man, and I tried to get him, because he's utterly terrified of Allah. There's nothing more terrifying in his universe than his God. And his vision of God is that if he doesn't behave impeccably, he is busted. And I tried to tell him that, really, you're putting those limitations on God? Do you not know that God is love, unconditional? That you will never be judged no matter what? And he was not going there.
He was not going there.
So it's challenging. So this work is clearly
Well, it's challenging too, even in the words fear and awe. When that word is used, I can't remember what the Greek word is or the Hebrew word right now, but it means fear and awe. It can be amazement. It doesn't have to be, I'm afraid someone's going to do me.
Exactly.
Awe is great.
No.
But you may be blown away by the sheer power or majesty or something that you're experiencing that just brings you to your humility. But there's the fear we're talking about is really that fear that engenders doubt. The fear of scarcity, the fear of dangerous neighbors, the whole concept of enemies.
Well, our political leaders try to use fear to sway us one way or the other about legislation or government
I've noticed
actions, and just to watch what happens in the world. If you look at our United States Congress, or look at some of the other countries where they're at war, and there are so many dualisms of you're good or bad, or you're not good, you're evil, or but the separation. I'm hopeful about the spiritual teachers now that are bringing us to a more unitive consciousness.
Yeah, and that's what we're doing with the book, is taking it beyond duality, taking it up to a level where there is, in fact, only love. And so what we thought we'd do this evening is just go over our definitions so that everyone has an understanding of the vocabulary that we're using as we create this construct, this paradigm that we've brought to the table with this book. And Bill Gladstone, actually, this literary agent who's Eckhart Tolle's literary agent, and Neil Donald Walsh and Jean Houston and Barbara Marx Hubbard, he actually said that this book synthesizes, as no book published to date has ever done before, the true meaning of the present shift in consciousness, as many authors have identified and discussed in books such as Tolle's The Power of Now, Walsh's Conversations with God, and even Burns' The Secret. So he spent the time to really see what we're bringing to the table. And it is a unique synthesis, but it does so relate to the essence of Christianity and the essence of all major religions, of that divine connection of humanity to a force, to something bigger than all of us.
So Jane, your question was, how do we get there?
Yeah.
So
I'm real practical.
Yeah,
And
so are we.
I'm real practical, and I'm always thinking about, and here's two people leaders in our church here, how do we bring this, make it real to the people that show up on Sunday and may have fear. Or may have-
And it's hard not to have, in the current world, it's not easy to live a life that doesn't have any fear in it. That's not an easy thing.
So I'm not thinking of fear of what's reasonable, at least in my eyes. I mean, there are some things to fear, but I'm thinking more of an anxiety about life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
Well,
what?
I think it's possible, and it can take practice, but to get to a point of being absolutely fearless. But it's going to take having a very different take on life.
And
on
how the universe
reality.
works. It's really the mechanics. How does the universe work? I think we've been operating on misinformation, and it's the logical mind operating on misinformation that has us out of balance. And that as our consciousness rises, as these systems collapse and we're thrown into this kingdom of God within, that Jesus says we've all got, that we're going to trust that, because that's all we can trust ultimately, and move to a higher frequency. That trust. Wallace Black Elk, a Lakota elder that I used to bring here to the valley, said after a sweat lodge one night, he said, "Man has doubted the Creator since the beginning, and that doubt has plagued him." You see? So it's doubt. It has a frequency. Doubt has a frequency. Trust has a frequency. And everything has a frequency. And that's what we bring to this in this book. And that as we raise our frequency, the laws that actually apply to us change. So we're actually dealing with a whole different paradigm, a whole different world when we're in a higher frequency. So, and that's what we feel Jesus did. He was in that frequency when he brought in the loaves and the fishes, that total abundance, that unlimited abundance. He was in a higher frequency. He reached into that frequency and brought forth what can be for all of us, all the time, unlimited abundance. But we can't fathom that because we're living in a lower frequency where the laws say it's limited. You see, it's concepts that are beyond our conscious mind that we can only get inklings of, and we're just bringing some tools to go to a place to think it's possible.
Okay, let's talk some more about the tools.
Yeah, and so
Okay.
we just go over our...
I just want to say that Connie brought up a point that's one of the most central things to understand about what this book brings. And that is this idea that the laws are different in the different frequencies. And I think we've all been in love. We know what that state is. That simple thing of falling in love with another human being and finding ourselves in an elevated vibratory consciousness. And I think we've all had this experience that when we're in that state, the laws are different. Things work, things go smoothly. It's kind of magical. It's what we think of as magical. And on the other end of it, we've all been in that state of fear, of anxiety, where we get stuck in the traffic, we're irritated, we're upset, we're not going to get there on time, and nothing works. The laws are different. And there's just one thing I'd like before we get to this, and we will. One of the interesting things was getting this whole concept onto a single page. Part of the idea was, if you can't get it onto a one-page, it's too down complicated. So the handout you have is a very simple set of what we call them definitions. It's the terminology we use. We use certain words differently from, I think, the way most people do. So it's important to understand what we mean when we say a certain word or use a certain phrase. And then these 10 assumptions, just 10 simple beliefs that we're offering. It's quite okay to accept or reject any of them. It's quite okay to make up your own. But I wanted to start this whole section with a quote from Henry David Thoreau, one of the greatest American thinker, philosophers, spiritual beings of this country. There is a great American intuitive who did a lot of study with Native Americans, and he talked specifically about the laws being different. Would you give us the quote?
And it's in the conclusion to Walden. I don't know how many of you have read Walden, but in the conclusion to Walden, Thoreau says, "I learned this, at least, by my experiment, that when one walks confidently in the direction of his dreams, he will pass a certain boundary. He will experience a success unexpected in common hours, and the laws that apply to him will be expanded, or new laws will be made in his favor, and he will live with the license of a higher order of beings." Okay, so right in that quote, he's saying, unexpected in common hours. We can't even imagine it. Okay, what's there? Because the laws are different. The license of a higher order of beings. This is what Jesus did. He embodied a higher frequency. You know, the indigenous peoples of the Aborigines, they can heal. They can heal bones. You know, they can heal, anything. Jesus, did that. Rise and you can walk and do all this, whatever, these things we call miracles. The native peoples of the world have been doing that forever.
We lost that way back there, didn't we?
Yeah, we lost it, but also because I feel that the earth has been in a field of fear. So even the indigenous peoples of the world, even though they have a trust-based paradigm and they have access to this connection to all that is, they had been influenced by this fear energy as well. So, and this Christian thing, it's a trust-based paradigm, but nobody's actually lived it in its pure form yet on the planet because of that fear energy. And I feel the earth is moving out of that fear energy, and we're feeling it. Things are happening as we're starting to trust and starting to feel it. We are moving into that higher consciousness. So it's a evolutionary upward spiral, is what we call it. And so Thoreau expressed it very well. And there's also a quote by Goethe that many of you might know, which is, "Whence one commits without hesitancy, without the chance of turning back, Providence moves too. And one experiences all manner of unforeseen circumstances, material assistance, chance meetings, which no man could have dreamt would have come his way." Okay, that's attributed to Goethe. It's not actually Goethe. It's a Swiss mountain climber.
The Scottish mountain
climber. Murray, who actually said that. But those two quotes combined tell us that when we commit, when we trust, totally trust, without a chance of turning back, Providence moves. Providence doesn't move. We move ourselves to a higher frequency. That's what we're bringing to the table. We have the free will to shift our reality to this higher frequency. And that's what we're bringing, the tools that we're bringing.
Yeah, so thanks. So Thoreau says we have the capacity to live by a higher order of beings. And your question was, and now we'll answer the question, how do we do that?
Yeah.
How do we live by a higher order of being? Do we, as spiritual beings having a human experience, as so many people say, is it possible for us to sort of dissolve the illusory boundary that says we can't do that? You know, we've put ourselves, we've accepted collectively, in our consensus reality, we've accepted this box that we live within, and if it's outside of that, we can't go there. Well, we're suggesting that we can. We're suggesting that we can dissolve those boundaries, which are boundaries of doubt, fear, separation, and so on. And in order to do that, we're offering something, and it works. It's certainly, I can speak for myself, it certainly works for me, and we're getting reports back from people who this book is actually changing their lives. And Unity Church, for example, out in Tulsa, Oklahoma, has adopted this book, and a spiritual community down in New Mexico has adopted this book, and they're really using it. And it's, if you take it and use it, if just adopt it, it works. As Connie often says, you have to take these ideas as absolutes, just as you would, let's say, if you converted to Judaism or Buddhism. You'd go and then you'd sit with a teacher and you would learn what it was. This is a worldview, this is how it works, and so one has to do that. So we're actually offering an alternative worldview.
But we're not asking anybody to take it on as dogma. We're just saying try it.
Yeah.
And see what fits, see what doesn't fit, see how it changes how you see the world. It's not about joining or being something like a religion.
No,
but
I'm saying there's
world
parallel
view.
to that, because unless we really commit, you want to go skiing, you've got to really commit to come screaming down that mountain. You've got to trust something. You've got to trust your physicality. You've got to trust your training. You know, I'm a surfer. Same thing. You've got to go for it. You've got to step over the edge where angels fear to tread. And go there. You've got to walk it.
I think skiing is a very spiritual activity, really,
course it
because
is.
of the,
Yeah.
Dealing with the forces of nature, and
Uh-huh.
how about surfing? You've damn well got to know how the waves work and what's going to
Uh-huh.
happen if you're going to step into that wave, you know?
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah.
Well,
We-
it also occurs to me that maybe this would be a way to talk about it, I'm not sure. Would it give one a structure within which to grow? Because we
Yeah.
do grow best and mature best if we have something to bounce off of. And oftentimes the church and its teachings and its practice can be that for somebody. But then they grow past that in a way, and what might have seemed like a rule over here is, well, maybe a rule, maybe not. But for a period of time in growth, it has formed, it has been a container.
yeah, and a foundation, going back to, okay, trust the loving universe. Okay, it's a loving universe. Okay, trust the loving universe. You know, if you get in fear, you get in doubt. You know, I hang on to Washington crossing the Delaware. You know, what he accomplished by acting in total trust. I mean, what happened there was out of this world. You know, when
It sure didn't look like it was going to happen.
it didn't look like, he didn't look like he was going to succeed in any way, shape, or form. But he did this many times. He walked over that line into trust, where the magic lives. And so, you know, holding on to a foundational principle can help one through a process of growth. So one thing I thought maybe we'd start with Wayne Eagleboy's,
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
because we opened the book with an opening prayer,
Okay.
and we just
And
thought,
it's a Native American prayer.
It's a
so
Native
that
American
just seemed
prayer.
like a really beautiful sort of indigenous way to open the book, to put the reader into a certain state of intention, shall we say.
so I'll read it. It's, grandfather, creator of all that exists, with this sacred pipe hear my prayer. As the new day dawns, let all people begin anew to walk the good red road of life. May we forget our differences. May we remember our likenesses. Let us hear what we have not heard. Let us see what we have not seen. It is the spark of the universe, the oneness of all life. In such a way, may we be blessed, blessed in a sacred manner. Wayne Eagleboy.
And we thank Wayne Eagleboy, who we've not met. We actually found this on a painting that he had done on a poster, and saw it and went, wow, that just has to be in the book. And we're actually trying to find him. And he's not easy to find because we'd actually like to get permission. We just used it with love and respect, and yeah, he may or may not like that.
Maybe he'll pick it up and read it.
Maybe.
Yeah,
We don't know.
we'll
We don't
find
know.
him.
Yeah.
We'll find him.
Yeah. So what we're really talking about here, and I don't think there's any conflict whatsoever with the true message of any of the religions. I think it is actually the foundation of the true religions. It's a certain understanding of the nature of the universe. And I think what all the religions have in common is this intuition, really, because we can't sort of pull it down and measure it and weigh it and so on, that there's something beyond the visible, that there's spirit, there's something, the universe, whatever you want to call it, you can call that God or Allah or whatever. It's alive. There's something there. There's some power or force or energy. Quantum physics is actually beginning to, they desperately don't want to go to sort of mysticism or love or religion or any of those things, but they're sort of almost being forced there because there's something there. There's some connecting energy that seems to just pervade the entire universe. So this pervasive energy or entity, because in the largest sense, there's only one thing, there's only one entity, and that is what we call the conscious, loving universe. We stay away from terms like God and so on, just because there's so much misunderstanding around them. There's so many different interpretations. So the conscious, loving universe is just, it doesn't have any baggage. So let's get there.
Okay.
So what we're talking about is, a lot of people talk about, we need a new paradigm. We need a paradigm shift. So what's a paradigm? In the simplest terms, the simplest of terms, a paradigm is simply a set of assumptions about any particular subject. The scientific paradigm is the current set of assumptions about the physics and the chemistry and the biology of this universe, right? It's simply a set of assumptions. What's an assumption? An assumption is a core belief, a belief that we take to be true without question. Okay, if it's a belief that we are questioning, it's no longer really an assumption. It's something we're examining. So we're suggesting that we actually take these unconscious beliefs and make them conscious and examine them. So when we get to our actual assumptions, you'll notice that they're probably, in every case, the 180-degree opposite of the current consensus reality. We're really taking current reality and flipping it on its head and having a look at what that might mean. Because if the current way isn't working, let's invert it and see what that does. Thoreau said, what did he say about his neighbors?
Everything that my neighbors assume to be good, I assume to be bad. And the only thing I'll ever regret is my good behavior.
I love Thoreau.
This boy, yeah, we do a lot of work with Thoreau, but anyway.
So why don't you talk? So now we're going to talk. So it's a paradigm which is a set of assumptions. An assumption is a core belief that we haven't questioned. Now we're suggesting going into this set of assumptions and possibly replacing them in the same way you'd replace the operating system in your computer when it gets sluggish and slows down. It's not doing its job. Can we replace our operating system, which is which is our thoughts? It's the contents of our minds, which is really the only thing we actually have control of. You can lock my body up, but you cannot lock my mind up.
That's another Thoreauism.
Yeah.
So our next, definition, which is a key fundamental definition. And please comment as you hear these as far as the Christian, how it parallels or where it diverges from or is complementary
Okay.
to.
Yeah, so
And
we're looking for the, we're
If
looking
you
for.
have any thoughts?
And, oh, by the way,
Chime
what
in.
we're gonna do is talk for a bit, the three of us, and then we're gonna take a brief break, 5 or 10 minutes, get a little refreshment, come back, and then open it up, and
Okay.
let's, okay? That, I think that's a good structure.
That sounds
So,
good.
yeah.
So here's humanity, a collection of divine, autonomous, sovereign beings who have chosen to incarnate on earth to learn and grow on their soul's journey to wholeness, each with an individual purpose and a unique gift. So what's contained in this sentence is that we are divine beings who have chosen, okay? So this assumes reincarnation. It assumes that there is something beyond the physical, a place that our souls inhabit in the oneness, in the all that is, and that we choose to incarnate on earth. So that's a pretty
Yeah.
big
Well, it's a big
assumption.
one, and it's particularly interesting because you won't see much of that in traditional Christianity, probably after about the 5th century. You do see it
Oh,
in.
it is there early.
Oh, it
Oh, it
definitely.
is, I didn't know that. Oh, cool.
Definitely there earlier. It was, you'll find you'll find some in the Old Testament. You'll find some references in the New Testament to it. I think mainly in Matthew. If you remember where they'll say, was it John the Baptist or is it Isaiah returned? You know, because these prophets were assumed to come back.
Oh.
And so Jesus was often thought of as one of like Isaiah again. And a belief in reincarnation was a part of Jewish thinking and still is I think. I don't know, I haven't been in any conversations about it, but in study, it was actually related to this idea of free will, that there was some relation to your coming back, and you may change things, do things differently, but I really can't say much about that. But what is most interesting about it, it was quite prevalent in the early writers, like Origen was one of the first Christian, we'll call them the church fathers, who very much believed in it and wrote about it. Augustine did. I've got a statement of Augustine's.
Good, because I thought it wasn't there.
So these people believed in reincarnation, but the growing church, and then the church split in between East and West, didn't want that, and really they pretty much stamped it out. And that probably has something to do with the split between the East and West, and that's the Roman Catholic
And the
Church and
Roman-
the Eastern Orthodox.
And did the Roman cosmology, with their gods?
Yeah,
and
well,
so-
Plato,
Did they have,
yeah, they did.
So did the Romans have an idea of reincarnation?
I think so.
And if so, why would they wipe it out later? Yeah.
The church
interesting.
wiped it out.
Yeah.
Reincarnation was really well respected. A significant number of early church pillars, such as St. Augustine, Clement of Alexandria, St. Gregory of Nyssa, Justin Martyr, and St. Jerome, believed in the doctrine of reincarnation.
Ooh.
In his Confessions, Augustine's Confessions, he says this: "Did my infancy succeed another age of mine that dies before it? Was it that which I spent within my mother's womb? And what before that life again? O God of my joy, was I anywhere in any body?" And so that's just one of the writings.
I
So you
like
see
it.
it very,
Thank you.
it was very strong
Thank
back then. We just don't ever hear about it. We don't ever think
Yeah.
about it. I mean, I don't think about it.
In this culture,
But I go
it's
back,
pretty, yeah, it's
you go back
regarded
into
as,
to the early, Christian origins,
yeah.
and in Judaism it was quite well accepted. So
Good, so
when
there's
I
no,
when I
so
discovered
good,
when
there's
I
no
discovered
conflict
that,
there.
I thought,
Yeah.
oh yeah, this
Yeah.
is
Oh,
making
good.
even more sense.
Okay, so humanity, as Connie says, humanity is a collection of divine, autonomous, sovereign beings. Think about just that. I mean, we could do a whole seminar just on divine, autonomous, sovereign beings. We're each here, we're set free, we're sovereign. And we don't know that, so we tend to, we tend to be easily herded by whoever thinks they're controlling us. But the fact is, that's not the way it is on the highest level. Who have agreed, using free will, who have consciously said, I'm coming to Earth to have this experience for my personal growth, but there's no such thing as individual personal growth on another level too, because it's all part of the oneness. So from my perspective, it's like God having these trillions of experiences as all these different beings, and it's just this incredible blossoming of awareness, of consciousness, of experience. It's wonderful.
So we're looking at that as the overarching act of free will, okay? Because when we go a little further with this, we'll show you, it's that paradox of determinism versus free will. And we feel we've resolved that paradox with this overarching act of free will. Yes, I will go to planet Earth on this journey to wholeness with a gift and a purpose. Okay, so I'm going to bring a gift to the party. I'm promising to the whole universe, I'm going to bring a gift to the party. And I've chosen to do this. I've chosen to bring this gift and this purpose. And I want to become more whole. We're whole, but we have lessons to learn to accept that wholeness. So I'm going to come to Earth. So I have these lessons on this journey to accepting my wholeness. We're calling it the journey to wholeness. Okay, so this is just totally key in transforming one's understanding of one's life, of what comes into one's life, because of this overarching act of free will, saying yes, loving universe, I will go and bring this gift and go on this journey. You get to take me on this journey. And then we forget, we incarnate in this lower frequency. We look around and we say, okay, how do I survive? And we take on the rules of this lower frequency, and we divorce ourselves from our true self. And we say, oh, to be successful, to be loved, I've got to make money, and I've got to do what Daddy wants me to do, because of if I don't, Daddy's not going to love me. Nobody else is going to love me. They're going to think I'm a bum, and I'm not, whatever it is. You see, if I don't take on the construct and show up within it, I end up outside it, in a loony bin, in jail, in whatever, flunking.
Well, we're less likely, I'm thinking of the concept or the reality of becoming victims.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to become a victim of any number of things.
And
Or to talk about it like that.
One thing this does, if you get the trust frequency concept or cosmology, victims gone, perpetrators gone, because in a very real sense we co-create our own reality. Something happens that we, out of fear, choose to see it from a victim standpoint. That's something really worth looking at, because there's no such thing.
Yeah, and this is key, because we've said, yes, I will go on this journey to wholeness, and everything that happens in our life is to take us there. And what we don't when we don't understand the nature of the conscious loving universe, that it's showing up for us to take us there, even if it doesn't feel good, it looks like victimhood. It's a huge concept to grasp, but it's key.
Well, it is.
In the whole transformation of one's life.
It's not the way I have been thinking for so many years. Maybe always.
Right, absolutely.
No, it's, I hear you talk about it. I've heard other people talk about it. I've talked about it too. It's kind of like I practice it and think, well, gee, what if things are like that? Maybe they are.
Maybe they are. So we're saying absolutely. And from childhood, You know, when we come home crying, somebody bullied us or somebody was nasty to us. Oh, you poor thing, that's such a bad boy for doing that to you. Instead of, okay, what is that boy teaching you? You know, what is that person who was just mean to you? What are they here to show you about yourself? You know, and today as adults. But from, you know, you said for all your life you've been, you know, enmeshed in the victim thing or whatever, thinking that way, because we're taught that we are victims of this, of that, of the government, of whatever it is. When in fact when we understand this, that there's only love and that there's only our soul's journey to wholeness and free will, it can't be anything but serving us out of love.
You know, we were talking a little bit about the history of Christianity, and I was saying that this idea that the soul comes back was very much a part of ancient learning. It was for the Jews in ancient Judaism, and you can go back to some of the studies of Kabbalah, and that's the mystical study of mystical Judaism, was that they believed that the soul went through a succession of lives. And that was really a key to penetrating the deep mysteries of life. It was very important back then, at that time. And there was even a Christian, one of the very early Christian church fathers, his name was Origen, O-R-I-G-I-N, who lived from 183 to 253 AD, got into a lot of trouble with the church.
That's usually a good thing.
That's a good thing. He wrote this: the soul has neither beginning or end. They come into the world strengthened by the victories or weakened by the defeats of their previous lives. And as you talked about what our lives, this sort of process of life is, and I'm, you know, I can say, oh, well, Connie's into all these ideas. But I can go back here to a church father and he says about the same thing that you said.
Interesting. I didn't know
How about
that.
that?
Thank you. That's
great.
really
Thank
important.
you. That's why
yeah.
we wanted.
Okay.
That's why we came
Yeah,
together.
that's great. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
us came
so there's
together
no
because
conflict
we.
there either, because that's the one place I thought that, oh, you know, it's going to be difficult for a Christian to go there. But
Well,
no.
it would be for some
Yeah.
that
Okay.
think that whatever
Okay.
the church voted on is
All right.
it.
So the idea that being that we make an agreement to come to this life, to then experience anything that shows up, changes one's attitude. Because if I come here with a purpose, and a part of that purpose is to learn and to grow and to expand in understanding and compassion and so on, the things that occur that I wouldn't have chosen because they hurt or they're, you know, they just don't seem right.
Yeah, and
And
what
then
did he
you're
say?
looked at from another perspective. We're totally talking about shifting perspective here, flipping the lens through which we view our experiences.
And he says, they come into the world strengthened by the victories or weakened by the defeats of their previous lives.
Okay.
So we, you know, it is an evolutionary upward spiral that we're working. We come back every time to experience what.
Well, you know, part of the Christian, and let me just I could say worldview or paradigm, but the sort of the Christian life is one that recognizes that in our lives there will be times that we are on a downward spiral. There will be times that we experience crucifixion, you see. But crucifixion's not the end of it. So there's where we get into sort of the depth of the Christian model ethos.
And see what we would say, and this leads into the next definition, love, the definition of love, okay? The fundamental unifying and creative force of the universe. Okay, which leads to our first assumption, we live in a conscious, loving universe. There is only love. Okay, so on that crucifixion, from this point of view, that crucifixion would be the death of things that don't serve us. Okay?
Right.
It would be love coming to us, putting us through a process on this soul's journey to wholeness, to accepting our oneness with all that is, that it would be this force of love taking us, crucifying things in us that are standing in our way to achieving this wholeness. Self-doubt, self-hatred, all that stuff that
We
we've
have
got.
to die to some things in order
Yeah.
to live
Yeah.
some other things.
So that's what we would say,
Okay.
that this crucifixion would be. It's all to serve our higher evolutionary upward spiral of humanity and of the individual on this journey to wholeness.
And I would say when these experiences happen that feel like crucifixion, that if we are in a state of profound trust, that it's very different from when we're in our judgmental mind thinking this is horrible, this is awful, we're in a state of fear, that, and experiencing it as wrong, because there's a higher place where there's no wrong. It's only what is.
Well, that reminds me of my own process of becoming a minister, that life was going along fine and then life fell apart. Everything that I was expecting, what everybody expected of me, what I planned on. And it all just, within about a year's time crumbled like this. And
There you go.
And I felt like I was ashes on the ground.
There you go. That's
And-
absolutely.
I must have had, I think I did, had a trust that something was going on that kept me going. Now, it's not that it was there all the time, and so I think, as we look at these, they're not always there for you because we can't always keep up with them. And there would be times I would think, I am totally defeated, I shouldn't even live. Somebody should do away with me. I do remember thinking that.
Yeah.
But I kept going. And I would pick up maybe even just snippets of love your neighbor as yourself, or do not judge, or you're the salt of the earth. Some, things, things that would come from the Bible, that would come from the tradition that had always been important to me, but I'd never really had to use it.
Yeah.
Never really had to put it to work in my soul.
Ah.
But it kept, something, it's like I kept evolving and didn't know where I was going,
Yeah.
but thought maybe I'd go somewhere.
There's nothing like crisis to get us
Yeah,
going,
yeah.
Yeah, because
And that's why I'm so very serious about all this. I don't come from this, it's just a nice thing to study. It's life-giving.
Yeah.
Sweet, that's beautiful. And this definition of love is very important in this construct, because Andrew will the universal aspect of this love. It's the love with a capital L, and it's the gluon. Do you want to explain the quantum aspect of the love that we're calling love?
Okay, so looked at from a quantum science standpoint, what on earth could love be when viewed, if science ever has the courage to say, okay, love, we've heard of it, what on earth is it? Let's look at it. And let's look at it on the biggest possible level. It is that which creates and sustains the entire universe. The universe is love. It is simply, if we just take the expression that every religion states, God is love, with a capital L, means that, and firstly, from my perspective, there's nothing but God, there's nothing but love, so there's no devil, there's no good, there's no bad, there's no us, there's no, God is separate. Those are our human imaginations. Love is that which, just like the love that, shall we say, holds a family together, it's love that holds molecules together.
It holds that carbon atom
Yeah,
together.
yeah. It's
Those
love
neutrons and
It's love
protons.
that holds the whole universe together. It's the fundamental force, power of the universe. And it is completely non-judgmental as to what it allows to manifest. So if in my mental state, I'm in a state of fear and I'm expecting a disaster, guess what? Chances are I get a disaster because we're mentally incredibly powerful beings. If I'm expecting to find a wonderful partner in life, I'm very probably going to find a wonderful partner in life, depending on my state of consciousness.
And, yes, go on.
Okay.
Yeah, and so what we're saying is that this love is unconditional, and we're redefining. Most people think unconditional love means I'm going to be sweet and kind to you no matter what you do. Okay?
Right.
So we're redefining that and clarifying the understanding of what unconditional love is. And that is that it gives us everything we ask for. It is not unjudgmental. Whatever we ask for is what we get. And whatever our soul came in for, this journey to wholeness, whatever experiences this soul came in to experience, these loving energies have to give it to us.
I have such a hard time
With that one.
with that one. Yeah.
You know, it takes it takes truly understanding and accepting our power as human beings. We are not separate from the Creator. The Creator-creation line, dividing line, is actually illusory. We create reality with the power of our consciousness.
Our own individual.
So when Connie
Reality.
says the universe gives us everything we ask for, if you think of the universe as God, and God is not separate from us, and our mind contains thoughts, these thoughts, which are also our assumptions, our opinions, our beliefs, determine what it is we ask for. We may consciously think, I want a fantastic new job. But so I think that's what I'm asking for on a conscious level, but on a subconscious level, if that idea is undermined, sabotaged by my deep unconscious belief that I don't deserve it, that I'm not worthy of it, that it's never going to happen, guess what? That is the more powerful one than the conscious one that says, I'm going to get this fantastic new job. So I end up,
Well, Matthew writes, seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added. You were talking about the Sufi and how much the Sufi loved the divine. I think we forget to love the divine.
It's hard.
And has it manifested
The
and
way
to
it's
understand.
expressed is difficult. You earlier on said this beautiful, I think it's a Jesus quote, or from Matthew, which is, you're instructed, you're commanded to love the Lord thy God.
With all your heart.
But if you're also instructed to fear God, and you think that God is this authoritarian being who's going to punish you if you make the slightest error, you can't love that entity. So, this...
I never grew up with any kind of fear of God.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
But what you said about your life was all going in this one direction, everything was working out just fine, and then it all crumbled and sent you in another direction, right?
Right.
Okay, so
And I
whatever caused it
questioned
to
it all.
crumble, whatever caused
Yeah.
it to crumble, you could say, this is horrible, I'm a victim, but whatever caused it to crumble was the conscious loving universe cooperating with your soul to experience those experiences, to take you to the place where you said you'd known all these attributes of truth and that you'd never applied to your life. It transformed your life by crumbling. From the ashes rises the phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
You went there, you made some choices, made some realizations that took you on another path. That's the loving universe taking you on your soul's journey to wholeness. But it didn't feel good. You felt like a victim. You felt worthless. You felt, it took you down where you could discover your core essence of Jane. I'm Jane. I'm not what people expect of me. I am these ashes choosing what's going to rise out.
There was not much thought to what Jane was.
No, exactly. There was no thought to what,
And
a little
with most
thought.
people, I think that's the
That's-
case.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
very
Yeah,
key. to
So
this whole
until-
thing.
Yeah, until we
What we
become
are.
conscious, aware beings taking responsibility for the life that actually we create.
Yeah,
That's the
responsibility
way-
that our
that's the wake-up
soul came in to experience certain things. It's not that our conscious mind, we've created this, well, we have ultimately created what we're experiencing with the government and with all this other stuff. It really is our conscious mind, an outgrowth of what we're choosing at this level. But there's a deep soul level of humanity that's coming forth, that is this astounding, loving being, all powerful, all knowing, all loving being that is made in the image of God. That's a Christian thing, isn't it? Yeah,
Well, it's Judeo-Christian.
Judeo-Christian. We are the
And whatever
conscious,
that
loving
means,
universe.
That's a
You
tricky
see?
one,
Well,
isn't it?
that creation story where God creates Adam out of the dirt, I mean, there we are again with quantum physics, that we're all made of the same thing. You know.
Yeah, we're all made of
The
stars.
people, the
See,
stars.
we're all made of
yeah, we're all made of
stars.
stars, yeah. Let's have some comments.
Yeah, well, do we want to just
Let's zip on
just
through this
zoom?
really quickly, because I'd really like to have some interaction, and I think it's already, we've only got about 15 minutes
Okay.
left of the allotted time. So frequency, see, we use these terms in different ways. That definition of love's not the normal one at all. Frequency, the vibratory rate that determines the characteristics of a particular reality. It would seem that there are many realities. There are many, you could think of them as parallel realities that are attuned to different frequencies. So heaven is right here, right now. It's just in a different frequency. We can be in heaven right here, right now. We can actually manifest heaven on earth by moving into the trust frequency. I'm sort of summarizing part of what we're suggesting here. Free will. The right and the ability to choose our frequency. We can adjust ourselves, our beings, to whatever vibratory state we choose. So we can put our attention on the news and all the disastrous stuff, things that seem to be going on out there, and our vibration comes down accordingly. We can choose to put our attention on a higher place, a place of beauty and love and harmony. Our frequency goes up, our world shifts, it changes. Circumstance. This whole idea that we might be victims of circumstance, because circumstance just comes and slams us from time to time. Circumstance, the seemingly uncontrollable outward events that influence our decisions. So this is actually perhaps a higher element of our knowing. So we have free will on one level. We're going to proceed from A to B. Circumstance might sort of know something better, and comes and whacks us halfway along that journey and sends us into a totally other place.
And what we say in our assumption is it guides us on our journey to wholeness. Because it's
Circumstance
love. There's
guides
only
us.
love. And therefore, circumstance is this conscious, loving universe showing up for our soul to take us on this journey and help us bring this gift that we promised to bring to the party.
Okay.
Okay? And then consciousness. This whole thing, this whole discussion, from my perspective, is about consciousness, about the way we are in the world, the way we experience reality is through consciousness. There are two aspects of consciousness that we can look at. One is the consciousness of the entire universe, the primordial consciousness. Current science thinks that out of complexity, these complex beings with multiple carbon atoms and so on, the more complex it is, the more conscious it can be, and there's evidence for that. But what the ancient Vedic rishis, the masters, believe, and this is what I believe, consciousness predated everything. Consciousness is primary. But we don't experience that primary consciousness unless we're in a completely expanded state. We experience human consciousness. And human consciousness breaks down to 7 aspects, each beginning coincidentally, if there's any such thing as coincidence, with the letter A. Firstly and most simply, awareness. Our awareness somehow is filtered through our assumptions. You see how assumptions keep coming back around to that. Our assumptions really determine a huge amount of the nature of the world we experience. Attitude, our attitudes, our attention, where we choose to put our attention, our alignment, what we align ourselves with, which is another word for that is attunement, what we attune ourselves to. Action, the physical steps we take based on those previous A's, based on the awareness, the assumptions, the attention, the attitudes. We take action. And action it's what kind of, as Connie says, it's the kicker, because you have to walk it. You can't just have these ideas be in your head, be theoretical. You've got to put them into practice. You've got to be like the fool on the tarot deck. You've got to be willing to walk up that cliff with your eyes on the stars, trusting that you're going to make an appropriate landing. And finally, allowing. Trusting the loving universe to the point where you just step back and allow it to unfold. So it's really about walking in total trust.
And those are our requests to the universe. Those determine our frequency and our requests, those 7 A's. And there's 7 things that we have control over that are easy to grasp, easy to say, okay, what's my awareness? What am I bringing into awareness? What am I allowing? What are my assumptions? You know, those are tools people can use.
It's an actual toolkit for our personal consciousness.
To understand that they each has a vibration that determines our frequency, and there are requests. Whatever we put our attention on is that's the law of attraction. Whatever our attitude is has a frequency. It all has a frequency, and that determines our reality. There are requests to this loving universe.
All right, and finally, the last of these definitions, the term, what do we mean by when we use the universe? What do we mean by it? And what we mean by it is simply, in caps, all that is. Everything. The universe is simply the all that is. Both manifest and unmanifest. Some of the universe we can see and measure and experience, some not. But we know from science that 96% of the universe we haven't found it yet.
And it's a moving thing. It's always moving.
Yeah,
right.
And it's an ever-evolving entity. And what we call the universe is also known as God, as Creator, as Atman, as Allah, and so on. We simply call it the conscious, loving universe.
And we are the conscious, loving universe, each of us.
So it's not like there's over there in heaven, there's a conscious, loving universe, because I think one of the problems, if you will, of the way lots of people think is that there's a place called heaven that's somewhere over there, and in that place it's governed by something named God, and that's over there. And somewhere down there is another place called hell, and it's governed by a guy called the devil. And from my perspective, there's nothing but right here, right now. Heaven is right here, right now. Hell, too, is right here, right now, and it's up to us. We can experience hell. I think we've all done that from time to time.
Why?
We can experience heaven. It's here, and this imaginary elsewhere is one of the problems, I think, of our society. This idea of, with the fundamentalist Muslims that, well, I'm going to go blow myself up, and then I'm going to get 74 virgins in heaven. What am I going to do with 74 virgins? One's too much, or, it's troublesome.
Yeah, and dying and going to heaven. The whole, the Christian thing.
Well, that came from the worldview of maybe first century, but way back there, before so much more was known that the world was even round. So it seems to, one of the things, I talk about this gives me a cosmology that I like to work with, because when we were still working with that 3-tiered universe, then all thoughts about how we're to live come from that cosmology.
What, 3-tiered, heaven, hell?
That was, yeah.
Back in the day, back in Greek times and so on, right? There was there was earth, there was heaven, and there was hell.
Right,
There
and
was
even
the
other
overworld
creation
and the
stories
underworld.
will have a kind of a 3-tiered universe
Right.
where God reaches down and does this creation and
Right.
come back and then even in I guess maybe around 1700s there was the idea that God was this distant patriarch. I think you mentioned that
The
too.
distant patriarch. Yeah.
And far away. That, to me, that was a very dangerous cosmology.
Yeah, and she's not very far away at all. She's
Yeah.
right here,
Yes.
right now.
Yeah.
So let's,
Other ideas?
anybody have
thoughts?
any thoughts?
So what we'll do next week is we'll pick up with the first assumption and we'll start working through the assumptions because and the opposite of the first assumption. So we can have a look, and we don't put a lot of attention on that, but it's useful sort of to see how the current assumptions, which tend to be, they're not universally, and not all of us are immersed in or enmeshed in fear, but they tend to be scarcity-based, mechanistic, reductionist, etc. And they really have determined the world we experience. So we'll do that next week.
And relate it to Christianity and bring in more of Jane's amazing knowledge of.
Yeah, thank you. You brought
Wow.
something really precious there, was knowing the fact of that reincarnation was in the early church a part of the understanding.
Yeah, and
That
so
got,
much of
that
your
got
knowledge.
voted out.
Well, it got voted out, but
Wow.
I think it had to do with if people believed that they would have more autonomy, they were less likely to follow the rules that were given them by the emergent church. And the emergent church was what also sort of replaced the Roman empires. And it grew up in that same sort of shape and took even some of the same titles. And as any organization, it needs to obtain its structure and how it can maintain that structure. And unfortunately, some things that people were supposed to believe went along with that. And I think it's been dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. Look,
For
look
many, many
look what's been
years.
done in the name of God.
Yeah.
I mean, there have been a lot of wonderful things that have been done through churches, all kinds of
Right.
churches, but there have been some disastrous things
Yeah,
too,
exactly. Yeah.
because of the worldview. That
So Jane, shall we open it up to your friends here?
I would love to hear from.
So have we triggered any ideas, any thoughts, any questions, any comments, observations?
Disagreements.
Welcome to throw vegetables, we're vegetarians.
Well, you mentioned how you're optimistic about how people are, I guess, a level of higher consciousness you believe is rising. You know, from my perspective, though, I see rampant materialism. I see degradation of the planet. I see people who are oftentimes thinking of short-term gratification instead of long-term gratification. I don't have the same optimism as you do. Maybe you can turn my viewpoint around.
Beautiful, thank you. We've just come back from attending a conference down in Boulder called the BEM, the Breakthrough Energy Movement. Energy, about technology, basically about energy. And I'll tell you what's really interesting. It was about that, but it wasn't only about that. I thought we were going to go to demonstrations of amazing, free energy machines and devices and circuits and things, and there was a lot of that there. But way beyond that, what was there was an optimism, and the word consciousness kept coming in the presenters. Consciousness kept coming into it. There's something going on this planet that probably because we've just released this book. What has it been? Half a year ago, 9 months ago. We're moving in a certain circle. We're going around presenting the ideas, and we're finding commonalities. We're finding others, and all I can report with great optimism is that something's going on. There's an awakening going on, and a part of what triggers it is exactly what you're talking about. Environmental degradation is wonderful from a certain perspective. Look at the cover of the book. You'll see that the foreword is written by a major climate change strategist. She's one of the world's leading authorities on climate change. And she says that climate change is so extreme, so important, so critical, nobody's going to be immune, that it's, as with any major change, it actually takes crisis to trigger it. So anytime there's a crisis coming, know that that is the trigger for a higher potential. It's a wake-up call, anything like that. So all of this stuff, because we hear all these conspiracies, all of this stuff, all of this misuse of power, okay, is that what we want? Who's responsible for that? Is it them? From my perspective, there's no them. There's only us. I think on the species level, as Homo sapiens, the way we're manifesting on this planet, I totally agree with you. We can look at our past, we can look at our present and say, okay, is this truly what we want? Does this truly serve the highest vision we can come up with?
Yes, see, to me, everything serves the coming of peace on earth and heaven on earth. You see, for me, this is absolutely true, these 10 assumptions and these definitions. So everything, the question I ask about everything is, how does this serve the coming of peace on earth and heaven on earth? Okay, knowing that there's only free will, that we have to choose it. So everything is cooperating and manifesting the results of our thinking to show us that our thinking is erroneous, that we don't want to live like this, that now that we're connected in the World Wide Web, we love those people in Iraq. We love those people. They're people. We're connected with them on Facebook, you know. So we're in a position that humanity's never been in before, of being so interconnected that the heart can come forward universally, choose something else. It's going to, because you know those aren't just objects. You know, those are people that we love. Those aren't just trees that, you know, the end of the Amazon forest. You know, there aren't so many trees left in the Amazon forest that it doesn't matter. It matters now. Every tree that comes down, it matters. It hurts. And we get to choose something else. We say, no, we're not going to live like that. No. You see, so we have to come to a place where we're going to choose it. That's the key.
Well, isn't it partly that principle of the momentum? It's kind of like the 100th monkey, where, you know, some kind of behavior finally triggers where they all change.
Mm.
The other thing I think that came to mind as you were speaking was the Berlin Wall.
Yeah.
Remember, we watched
So
that
all
crumble.
of these changes have occurred,
And
these things that look
I
I couldn't
ineffectual.
believe
Yeah.
that kind of change was happening that fast. It was the same thing with the Soviet Union.
Apartheid
Exactly.
Apartheid went away in South Africa.
And
the
part-
Soviet
yeah,
Union. I
okay.
know.
So trust and know and go into your own heart and be the highest, best person you can be to contribute to that universal consciousness. And rather than putting your attention, see, that takes your frequency down, see, this whole thing of attitude, attention, okay, and assumption, all that is determines your frequency individually and contributes to the overall frequency of humanity. So it's so that's our thinking on that.
And the crazy thing is there's coming up on 7 billion of us on this planet? This change is going to occur one person at a time. As we deploy our intelligence, which is both our head and our heart, it's ridiculously challenging. It's utterly absurd if you look at it from a certain perspective. I have people tell me it's just wishful thinking. It's my favorite kind of thinking. They tell me it's just blue sky. It's my favorite color of sky.
And the darkest hour is before the dawn.
You know?
And
even if, you see, we can't change the behavior of others. No amount of parading through the streets and protesting or writing letters to the editor or any of that. The most powerful thing we can do is to change ourselves. It's actually the only thing we can do. And once our vibe changes, we begin to influence others. We can't have a thought without influencing the whole universe. Quantum science is showing that.
And then this whole 100th monkey thing, that once a critical mass gets to that place, then the whole thing shifts. So we have to make a decision what we want to contribute to the wolf, you know, the wolf of fear, the wolf of love, you know, which one grows, whichever one you feed. You know, where you put your attention is what you're feeding.
See, that's what a lot of people don't realize. You know, we have just beautiful friends who are profoundly into, you know, environmentalism or whatever their passion is, what the issue is. The problem is that we actually tend to feed those things. I totally respect, you know, pioneers and everyone who's out there fighting the good fight. But the most important thing from my perspective is to raise our, it sounds woo, it doesn't sound like it's effective, but the minute you make that shift, you become part of the solution.
And Kenny Osabel, we remember we saw a film by him, Pioneers. He's looking for a higher road out of this mess. You know,
Because we're not going to make it from our current state of mind. We're just not. And here's the real
And
point.
Einstein talked about
We're
Yeah.
not going to make it with our current set of assumptions. That's why this book is practical. We're not going to make it with assumptions of separation, of all of the fear-based
Scarcity.
things, because all of these things that you just described are a result of a fear-based paradigm.
it's this lower frequency. The only way out is up to a higher frequency. And Einstein said that no problem was ever solved in the same consciousness in which it was created. Buckminster Fuller said, don't try to fix the paradigm, create a new one.
The old one will fade
And the older
away.
one will fade away. It has to do with that, going to a higher level of consciousness.
And I have to say we're doing that. It's probably not percentage-wise a very large percentage of humanity right now, but there's an awakening going on. I mean, at times I look at what's going on, and just to take Africa, for example, we grew up in Africa. And I look at it and I shake my head like, really? I've got to be kidding. But I just trust that, and this optimism. I mean, this girl is, I call her the relentless optimist.
Because it's of what I see,
I
know.
I see both sides. She doesn't even
I
see
don't
both
see it.
sides. She
All
only
I
sees-
see, that's all I know.
What are
It's
you
a
gonna do?
wonderful reality. So, David, did you have something you wanted to comment?
Oh, well, I mean, I think the definitions, there's a number of them that I would agree with, or, like the universe. I think that in a lot of more progressive or Christian environments, we would agree that that's, the universe is here, it's now, it's not there or there. And love, there is one that sort of challenges my, as an assumption, and that, on humanity, and it's the phrase, who have chosen to incarnate on earth. And I don't particularly believe in predestination, which would be an alternative to that. But I'm not sure that I would assume that individual souls had chosen to incarnate on this particular ball of rock.
Okay. Yeah, I hear that, and I think you're not alone in that perspective. But as far as I personally can tell, after researching it to the best of my ability, from the because where does one get one's information from? The information I have is that we did, and that's all I can say. And there are books and so on I can refer you to that because this is very difficult to measure, and it takes some pretty people who are doing past life regressions and so on. If we don't believe in past lives, that's not going to work. And the way I got it, and it's probably about close to 20 years ago now, is that this woman named Diane Cannon was a past life regression therapist, a hypnotherapist who was taking people back to early childhood, and then she found you could go beyond that and end up in past lives. She said, well, where are you? And then she found other places that were neither this life and early childhood or previous lives, and she ignored them because they were just anomalies, and she just let them go, but this kept happening. And finally said, well, hang on, stop there. Where are you? Tell me, where are you? What's going on? And she found people, conscious human entities, at least their spiritual aspect, in places between death and life. And she wrote a book called Between Death and Life, and you can Google it. It's free on the internet. You can go find it. You can download a PDF and take it or leave it, but it really influenced me. I went, wow, that explains so much. And it basically presents the idea, and she's got hundreds of case studies that have done this, and this is the only way I know to do. It's like the near-death experience thing as well, Eben Alexander's Proof of Heaven, and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of humans who have experienced near death, gone somewhere, met entities there, experienced great beauty, didn't want to come back, but were sent back. No, it's not your time. You'll be back, but now you've got to go back to your family and you've got work to do. These kinds of things, they're hard to call them science in the sort of reductionist science, but they are. I mean, the nearest we can do as humans to study psychological phenomena or consciousness phenomena is to consult with lots of people and compare their reports. And there's something very real in this idea that I would have 20 years ago, I would have said, forget it. Now there's a lot of support for that we actually agree to come here, that there is a place between that, which means, of course, there is a place after death. There's a life, there's an afterlife, there's an existence. I used to have a hard time with that. Now I'm just having to give up and say, okay, sounds way better than the alternative,
It
which
still
is what?
just sounds so foreign. It still just sounds so foreign to me, the thought of choosing to come here.
But why not? If we're
Oh,
sovereign, yeah, why
sure.
not, you see?
Yeah, I mean,
It's a much more beautiful
it makes sense.
reality.
It's not a thought I'm accustomed to, you see. And
Yeah,
so
and
therefore
most
it's
people
like,
not, yeah.
like,
Well, you're talking about between, I'm not sure definite. I mean, the question has come up in my, I've thought about the question, if the population is growing, where are all the new conscious
New
entities coming from?
Mm-hmm,
Ah,
yeah.
there you
Okay.
go.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't
So
all be necessarily, maybe they've been hanging around for thousands and thousands of years.
How does one even know? There could be trillions of conscious entities clamoring to come to this
I
planet.
thought you were referring to between here and the rest of the universe.
As in other planets and so on?
Well, other.
Yeah, I honestly, I mean, that's a fascinating question. I'm convinced that there are countless human beings out there and other beings. Why not? It'd be absurd if this planet was the only one. But the real question is, you had a problem with the idea that we have chosen to come to incarnate on this planet. And I think there's a lot of evidence for that, and I'd be happy to talk to you about it afterwards and introduce you to some material, and you can see what others are saying.